So, thank you very much, Sheikh Shafi and City Retreat, for hosting this event. And I feel privileged that you've considered me to deliver this presentation. And I pray that it's of benefit for everybody that's listening here today. And I also hope that you take away from this presentation some practical tools that you can start actually, working in your life straight away. Um, so, the topic is how to develop resiliency in our lives, but fundamentally we're looking at our current situation where for some people, this situation's been very testing. For other people, they've actually enjoyed it, but I'm sure that it's brought up its trials and tribulations for all of us in some way or fashion. So to start off, it's looking at what is health for us. We often talk about, mental health in this time, and it's become quite a popular topic. But I don't like to just focus on the mental, to be honest. I like to look at it in a more holistic sense. And what is health? Um, it's really interesting that our religion, Islam, comes from Salima, which people usually translate as, the word coming from its salam as peace, but it's not really, that's not the fundamental meaning of this word. It's actually to be whole, or flawless, that whereby you have no need of anything outside of you, and you have everything available to yourself, and thus you feel a sense of inner peace, and you feel an inner sense of contentment. And that's fundamentally what we as Muslims are seeking, a sense of contentment, not happiness, because happiness is something that fluctuates we fluctuate through many states, so we don't want to be fixed in one state, but we do want to have an underlying sense of contentment. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. I'm content with God as my Lord, as Islam as my religion, and as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my prophet and messenger. So how do we develop and inculcate this sense of contentment, well-being, and health, this afia, this well-being, that again the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for? Interestingly, in the dua, he said if you're to ask for something, it's afu and afia, pardoning, i.e. being able to remove yourself from your past and not be so chained by your past, but be able to let go of it, and feel a disconnect from that so you can grow. This is the nuances of this word, of afu. And afia, coming from the same root, is again ability of growth and well-being, that I can move on from things and grow towards my potential. And the Prophet ﷺ coupled this also with yaqeen. He said there's nothing better after yaqeen than this afia. Because if we don't have well-being, then this does affect our certainty. And you can see this with people who are strong believers, but they've been through many, many tests. And if they don't tend to themselves, if they don't start processing what's affecting them, and they start to try to just transcend it or bypass it, that it will have an impact on their well-being, and will have an impact on their yaqeen, their certainty. And so I want to really focus about how the Prophet ﷺ processed things so that it doesn't affect our yaqeen and our certainty. So what is health? It's a sense of connection and availability from someone you sense can hold you when vulnerable. I.e., when I'm feeling weak, that I can feel held by someone. I can feel held by those closest to me. I can be held by my community. I can be held by my friends, but ultimately, we can even feel held by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's really fundamental that when we are feeling a bit off, we're not feeling exactly aligned in ourselves, that we pick up on that, and we don't just bury ourselves in productivity and bury ourselves and consume ourselves with moving on. Is that we take time to really sit with our experience and feel that sense of being held and supported in order for us to feel healthy as human beings. The next thing, the ability to get one's fundamental physical, emotional needs met. So can we, food, obviously, physically, food, drink, water, and so forth, but also our emotional needs of being able to reach out and feel like someone can we actually connect with that person when we are needing them. So again, not just holding everything in and feeling like we shouldn't share or we can't share, but that there are people that we can reach out to. Again, this is fundamental towards our health. And again, fundamentally, that's reaching out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the thing I need to impress is it's very, and this is a generalization, of course, but it's very hard to experience that holding from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being able to connect and express ourselves to Allah if we haven't first felt that in connection to human beings. And so we feel that, in an ideal situation when we're growing up with our caregivers. And then we can so that we can eventually move it and transcend it beyond to the ultimate, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have to have all of these things in play. A sense of self in relationship to oneself, others, and the world one lives in. So you feel a relatability, you feel a connection, you don't feel cut off, you don't feel like the world's against you, you don't feel that you've only got yourself there and you can't reach out. A feeling of agency, that one is able to meet challenges and surpass them, and when one cannot, one has the ability to recuperate, come back to a sense of balance and then try again. So one doesn't feel defeated by the world and feel that they're just going in on themselves and feel that they don't have, when I mean agency here, is really they feel a sense of, they have the ability and sense that they can achieve things in their life, and they can actually, when they have a decision to make, they do have a sense of self they can refer to, rather than them feeling like they never know what's right and they're having to always reach out to others. We do need to consult, obviously, but fundamentally we have to come to this point in our heart where we say, now I've consulted, now I've reached out, what is it that I feel aligned to? And this is where we have the Prophet ﷺ saying to the man, he says, if the different people of expertise are giving me differences of opinion, what do I do after that? Once I've realized there's this issue, this difference around this, and it's a grey matter, he says, consult your heart. And so after consulting outside of you, there has to be something you can come to within yourself that feels like an alignment almost, that you have some clarity within. The ability to let go of what one can do nothing about, or is too much for one to take on after taking action. So, and we see this again in the Prophet ﷺ, where the Bedouin came to him, came and visited him in the mosque and said, do I tie my camel outside, or do I leave it and put my trust in Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is an amazing quote, and it's often quoted, we hear it, is that it's not an issue of this or this, it's an issue of this and this. So i'qil, tie it, tether your camel, tithe and rely. It's not one or the other. It's not, these aren't polar opposites. They actually, even though they might seem like they are externally and superficially, fundamentally we need the both. The iyyaka na'budu, you alone we worship, but you alone we ask for help. So we need action, we need agency, we need to feel we have some sort of capability, some proficiency within ourselves, but then we have to let go of that, and then we have to realize that fundamentally Allah's in control. A map of reference point, a map or reference point for understanding yourself in the world and why things happen, and this is what religion, tradition fundamentally is. So this is, for me, when I've now the few years that I've been working and focusing on mental health and in my counselling work, this is what I see turning up in the people who come to me. This is what I see that they're really struggling with, and what they really need to move towards are these points. And there may be more than this, but this is the fundamental things that I've experienced and that have been apparent to me when working with people, is that we need to move towards. Now, the hadith that I want to explore today is a famous hadith that many of you probably are aware. It's related as a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Narrates by Anas ibn Malik that he said that the emissary of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam visited his son Ibrahim when he was on the verge of death. So his child is dying, and the emissary of Allah tears began to stream down his face. So he comes to visit his child, and he holds his child in his arms, and he realizes that his child is dying. And this is his son. This is the one that he has that he has a deep connection to, because remember, all his other sons passed away. He only had daughters that actually survived into adulthood. And this is his last child, and he's realizing as an infant this child is passing away and his life's ending. And so this is a very powerful, an immense event in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And he is coming to this realization, the experience of that this child, this son, is going to leave. And tears start to stream down his face. And one of the companions, Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, remarks, "O emissary of Allah." And they say, sorry, "You, O emissary of Allah, Anta ya Rasulullah." Now, this is the words in parentheses here are actually explanation that the scholars give, is that what he means by this is you, like out of surprise he's saying this. And the interpretation they give here is like, hang on a minute, you can look at this in many ways. What two reflections come to me is, number one, is that aren't you supposed to be aren't you spiritually realized? Isn't this antithetical to what spirituality is, that you're not moved by events, rather you have an almost non-attachment to things because you realize that God's decreed everything, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained everything in our lives. And so shouldn't we be, is crying not an expression of lack of contentment, and that you're struggling with this decree of God? And then the other explanation, which is given here, is that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged and called people to have sabr, forbearance, and resilience, we could even translate it as, or patience in times of tribulation. And now he's seeing him crying here. And is this not isn't this a sign of anxiety and fretting against the decree of God? And then the Prophet ﷺ, he explains that this is a form of compassion, a softness of heart for my child. I'm seeing this young infant struggling, and I have a relationship to this child, and it moves me. And in one narration it says this is actually compassion that Allah puts in the heart of those who have compassion, which I feel is so important, because it shows that spirituality does not mean that we're meant to disassociate from our emotions. Rather, when we react emotionally to an event, it's actually a sign of spirituality. It's just how we hold that emotion that's important. What we do with that emotion, how we channel that emotion. Because emotions are generally a symptom of us being touched by something. And thus, it's a healthy thing. And it's not an unhealthy thing. It's unhealthy. There are ways that it can be unhealthy in the way we react to the emotion, and that this is that we feel an emotional reaction to something is shown that we have a connection to ourselves and a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is the most important, and again this is another really fundamental point here, is that the Prophet ﷺ, then he's going through grief here. This is an experience of grief where. And what is grief? It's a disconnect from something that you're attached to, that is important to you in your life, and coming to terms with that. So the eye sheds tears. So notice, number one, he identifies with the experience physiologically, that there's tears coming down his eyes, or somatically. And somatic here meaning body. And then he goes to the next stage, and the heart feels pain or grief, the huzn or sorrow. So now he identifies emotionally. So he goes from the eye to the heart. And then the third point is, but we do not say anything except what pleases our Lord. Now, the most common explanation for this is that we shouldn't blame God for things, and we should be careful what we say in regard to God when we go through trials and tribulations. And obviously that's a sound interpretation. But I want to take it off on a slightly different reflection here, is that when we're going through some emotionally trying situation, we are not meant to process things cognitively straight away. We are meant to process things, first of all, physiologically and emotionally. And this is what we call a bottom-up approach. Bottom-up meaning we tap into the body, then the emotions, and then later on we explore things cognitively. If we can do that, what generally happens is we're processing the physiology of the experience, the emotions of the experience, and as they settle and we feel a completion, then we're able to actually assess and understand the circumstances on a cognitive level, and things make sense to us. However, if we try to understand things before we fully process things, we have the potential or propensity even to misunderstand things, because when we are emotionally overwhelmed or even physiologically overwhelmed, we're shaking, we're feeling unsettled. What happens, and this is what we're going to explore today, is that our cognitive capacities are incredibly limited, and thus we see things from a very narrow perspective, and so we have the propensity, and there's a danger of us really not seeing things clearly. And he says, we all feel sadness and pain for your departure, Ibrahim. And this is what I love about the spirituality of the Prophet ﷺ. He was very real with his experiences. It wasn't some sort of spiritual detachment where I'm okay, this is God's decree. And he aligned his experience with his belief and with his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is, I think, what we can learn from dealing with our experiences. This is a really great example that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrates here. And so what we learn from this is that our religion is a religion of integration and of integrating our experiences and having a holistic understanding of things. If you look at the way that Islam is explained by the Prophet ﷺ in the Hadith of Jibreel, is that we have Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And Islam is the physiological things that we can do, the utterance of the Shahada, the performance of the prayer physically, giving zakat, the monetary, fasting, again a physiological thing where we're actually refraining from things. And fasting's got a very profound and practical goal. One of the goals, one of the benefits of it, is that one is able to hold things without resisting and having to solve. Because when you're fasting, you just can't eat, and so you have to you have to deal with what comes up and the challenges that come up when you're holding back from actually just fulfilling something. And then obviously the Hajj that brings together a lot of those practices and more. And then Iman is the cognitive, it's what we believe. So it's a cognitive understanding of what we're doing. And then Ihsan is the integration of those two things. It's where this body and mind aligned with one another so that we can reach to something far broader than it, which is connecting to the ultimate. And seeing the divine plan in things on an experiential level, not just on a cognitive level. And so you'll notice that when we become Muslim, that we were asked straight away to pray. You know, in Surah Al-Hujurat, the Bedouins come to the Prophet ﷺ sort of proudly declaring that they've accepted Islam as if they've done a favor to the Prophet ﷺ. Sorry, that they believe, they say. And then Allah says to them, don't say that you believe, say that you've accepted Islam outwardly. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. But that faith has not yet but that hope that it will, entered your hearts. And so developing our faith is a process that starts physiologically. So we have an affirmation that I believe in this. And then we're called to get our head and our body straight in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to feel it physiologically. Whether we fully understand it yet, it's to be felt and experienced physiologically. So we stand before God, we bow before God, we actually prostrate our head and feel what that feels like physiologically, to submit to something and connect to something greater than us. And then we develop our relationship in understanding who is this that we're constantly and regularly through the day in these rituals connecting to, and trying to align that with our physiological experience, like our cognitive and our physiology, trying to align those things constantly so that they're actually in connection with one another and in communication with one another, so that we can experience something that's beyond the body and the mind. And what we see in this slide here is that by addressing things physiologically first, is often far more effective than us trying to address things cognitively. What we see in this is that 80% of our nerve fibers actually are in our body that send information to the brain. And only 20% of our nerve fibers actually send information from the brain to the body. So there's the body far outweighs the brain in terms of the impact it can have on our experience. And all of us have experienced that in our daily lives. You come home from the office and you're stressed, overwhelmed, maybe a bit numb because you pushed yourself too hard. And you're thinking, God, I just want to zone out. I'm going to go on Netflix now, or I'm just going to, tuck into a tub of ice cream, or whatever your choice of poison is. And then it dawns on you, says that's really not going to. It might make me feel better for about an hour or so, if that. But then I'm going to feel hollow after that. That's not really a healthy way of me sort of down regulating and feeling better about myself. But you say maybe I should just go and spend some time in prayer, or connect, or sit down by myself and just tune in or connect with my wife or my children and feel that connection with them. But how often is it that we end up submitting to those that are poisons rather than something that's wholesome? It's because the cognitive capacity is far less effective, or has far less impact than the body. Not dismissing that we can achieve a lot through the brain, but it's not the be and end all. It's a servant. It's not the master. It's not something that we can always rely on. And also, what's important here is to realize that we can send affirmations, but in the end it's got to be felt. It's got to be felt in the body and experienced, or it's going to have a little impact. So even when I work with affirmations with people, what I ask them is that if you say, for example, say Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, what's that like when you say praise be to Allah? Like, what's gratitude? When you connect to the concept of gratitude, what's the experience of gratitude in your body on a physiological level? What's the sensations you're experiencing? What's the emotions you're experiencing? What's the images that come to mind where you've really felt gratitude, not just uttering it? I feel as Muslims sometimes we use these concepts that are wholesome and nurturing and beneficial for our lives as weapons against ourselves. Like, I should be grateful. I should be this. I shouldn't do this. But it's never connected to the actual experience. And it's really important that when we wish to connect to something that's more, healthier, more productive, there has to be an embodied experience of that. So how do we do that? One concept that I think is really important for us to realize is memory, because a lot of people think that memory is connected to the brain. And we have a lot of understanding when it comes to explicit memory, but we don't realize that we also have implicit memory that is not as connected to the brain. So explicit memory is, and there's more than this, but this is oversimplification. But I think it's a useful tool to a useful map for us to refer to. Is we have declarative memory. Declarative memory is if I say to you, "What's your name?" and you say, "My name's Ibrahim." "Where were you born?" "I was born in, Leicester." So this is declarative memory. I ask you something, you declare it. It's just facts and information that you can spiel off. That's one form of explicit memory that's in the conscious awareness. That's what I mean by explicit, that you actually can summon it up in your conscious awareness. And then we have episodic memory. An episodic memory is episodes. So I say to you, what did you do yesterday? "Oh, well, I woke up at 8 o'clock and I had my breakfast and then, kissed my wife goodbye, went to work." So you're relating events. This is what we call episodic memory. But also we have implicit memory, memory that's not in the conscious awareness, but we experience it. And one of them is emotional memory. So in emotional memory, the example I usually give is, there's someone you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden, someone walks past you with a red jumper, and you just get this flash of rage as you connect to that person wearing the red jumper. And you've no idea where that emotion came from, because it seems so out of sync, or irrelevant to the actual event, the environment that you're in at the time. And what it may be, again, this is an exploration that someone has, is that maybe someone, when you were young, attacked you with a red jumper, and it was such an overwhelming experience for you that you can't hold it in your conscious awareness. And so you've suppressed it, not consciously. It was an automatic thing that happened. And then these things show up as emotional reactions that you have no idea where they came from. So they're not held in the conscious awareness, but we're having some sort of reaction to something. So we want to be really curious when we have we have either we can react to this in two ways: a hyper reaction, so hyperactivity, hyper arousal where we become activated, anger comes up, irritation comes up, and you just think, hang on a minute, this just feels really inappropriate. Yes, I was being triggered a little bit by what my wife said, but for me to start throwing chairs against the wall, that's a bit, that seems a bit extreme reaction. So we want to be really curious about that when that emerges. And then what we get the other side of the reaction, which we call hypo arousal. And hypo arousal is where we have amnesia around the experience. So you walk past that person with the red jumper and you just suddenly freeze. You just start zoning out, and you lose your sense of surroundings. And someone comes up to you and says, "Are you okay?" And you have no idea what happened. This is what we call an overwhelm response, where you basically disassociate, and you can't. So you're actually overreacting. You're not getting activated. You just completely zone out. This is what we call hypoarousal. And another way, so that's the emotional response. Another way we can respond to events, or another way that we tap into a memory, is a physiological response. So what we call procedural memory. Now, procedural memory is, for example, a simple example is you read in a book how to ride a bike, but that's not going to get you, or you do your theory driving, but does that mean you're ready for driving? Of course not. You have to learn how to drive, you need to physiologically and kinesthetically connect to that car. No amount of theoretics, reading how to do these things, is going to help you. You've got to get into the driving seat and feel the thing. And you learn how to do that through constant repetition. And then it may be that for 20 years you don't actually drive anymore. But when you get back into the car, you may be rusty. Your skills may be rusty, but your muscles It's not a conscious thing. Your muscles instantly move into actually operating this car. And so this memory is in your muscles. And this is what we mean by procedural memory. And when we're working with traumatic events, what can happen is someone basically flinches a lot. They react physiologically to situations that seem like an overreaction. So someone comes to whisper something to you in your ear, and suddenly you really flinch, or you even punch, for example, and you're thinking, whoa, okay, that person took me unawares, but I really responded I was really oversensitive to that, and we want to be curious about this. So it's not in our conscious awareness, it's in our physiological memory. So what I invite people to do, I want them to realize that our ways of experience ourselves, others around us, and the world is not limited to our explicit memory, our conscious awareness. But the modern world focuses a lot on conscious awareness and our cognitive rational faculty. We want to understand why, why is this happening to me? And it can be helpful, but it's not always going to really, you may understand why things happen, but it doesn't mean we solve things when we understand things. And so we have to really deepen our experience of ourselves, the people around us, and the world in different ways for us to really be able to bring about profound change. And before even trying to change something, we have to explore it. And that's what I mean by accept it. That's what I think many psychologists speak about when they mean acceptance. Carl Rogers has a famous quote about, you can't change until you accept something. And when you accept yourself, then you can change. Just paraphrasing there. And what I feel that means, and I've experienced this with clients and myself in my life, is that there are obviously some things you can change straight away. You can maybe eat slower. You can, if you've got a habit of putting your left shoe on before your right foot, you could probably change those. And through habitual reinforcement, you can improve on your behaviors. But a lot of things that we do are actually outside of our conscious awareness, and it's often that other people bring those things up to us and highlight them to us. And so for us to really tap into those things, we need to have a greater, more expansive awareness of who we are. And the way we can do that is by tapping into our sensations. And I've got a list of sensations that we're going to look at, inshallah. So we can actually do a bit of this work. So, for example, say if we want to explore anger, we say, how do you relate to anger? And you say, oh, I'm not an angry person, or yeah, I lose my rage a lot, my temper a lot. So when I say to the word to you, anger, how do you experience anger? And so if we said sensations, and you could do this with me, is that sensations, when I tap into anger, I feel like I'm generally a bit of a softie. So I say, oh, I feel a little bit of discomfort around it. I feel my chest feels like I feel like my chest is tightening. I feel my tummy sort of contracts. I feel a bit of coldness towards it. This is what I mean by sensations. Now, what's the feelings? Feelings, when I talk about feelings, I'm not referring to emotions. Feelings is a felt sense of something. So, feelings is your proprioception, or your what we call the use of your vestibular system, your sense of balance, your inner alignment. So when I, for example, here's a cup and here's my I'll use a pen actually, and I'm trying to align that pen on the cup and make sure it doesn't fall off. I'm not using my cognitive capacity to do that. I'm using my inner balancing system. See, I'm moving it around and I'm trying to align it to feel this sort of alignment in myself, to feel that that's right and I can let go now instead of holding on to it. So feelings is like this inner sort of sense of something that I'm off, I'm moving away from something, I'm aligned with something. Like just a general sense of heaviness upon me, myself drifting off. This is what I mean by feelings, and this is really useful in working with presence, because my belief is that a lot of this moving to health is about us being able to inculcate a sense and aligning with presence. But there are many barriers for us to do that, and one of them is that it's overwhelming to be with experience and presence, and so we can disassociate, or we can start going off with our mind. So we really need to be curious, because some of us can't actually immediately tap into sensations. It doesn't feel normal, or it doesn't feel comfortable to do so. Next one's the emotions. In emotions, the way we look at emotions are they emote motion. They bring about movement, either to speed up or slow down. So anger emotes me to move and act. And sadness emotes me to slow down and become reflective. Time almost feels like it's slowed down, and it's to really be, it's inviting you to be with that sadness, to be with that, that grief, or whatever it is that we're experiencing. So emotions generally, they move you to act, or they move you to slow down. And so when I touch into anger, what comes up? I feel this urgency, and anger, obviously being an emotion, is I feel this urgency. I feel like I'm erratically moving around my center. And then what's the behaviors? The behaviors is a physiological reaction. So when I tap into anger, I feel like I just want to move away from it almost. I feel my head turning away. I feel this aversion towards it. So I physiologically react. I feel that my toes come off my feet come off the floor, and I'm on my toes almost, and I'm not settled. So this is our behavior. Images can be, for example, when I tap into anger, I remember this event. So we go into an episodic memory. When I was 2 weeks ago, I lost my temper with my child, and you start connecting to that. And then what was coming up with that image in terms of behaviors, emotions, feelings, and sensations. But images are not just a visual image. They can be the five senses: smell, taste, hearing, seeing, visual, and feeling. So that's what I mean by an image. And then thoughts, we all relate to thoughts. I thought he didn't like me. I thought that he was being cruel. And then we have beliefs. I feel like such a fool. I'm an idiot. So these are beliefs about ourselves. So these are the 7 ways, and I'm sure there's more than 7, but these are 7 ways that we can tap into our experience. So when we're struggling with something, instead of trying to solve it, we accept it. And acceptance just means exploring it and being with it. And when we can really be with it, what happens is that things start to emerge. I talk about this emergent quality as like realizations can come up. But what often people do when they have that anger, for example, when they're not comfortable with anger, they start to snatch at how can I get rid of this, which puts us into a certain state whereby we're limited in our capacity to really behave appropriately and see the options available to ourselves. So I invite people, instead of trying to snatch for solutions almost, what is that? When you're really like, and you're pushing yourself to really try to find the answer to something, is can you just sit and sit with something, and what's coming up as I'm trying to think of that thing in terms of sensations, feelings, emotions, behaviors, images, thoughts, and beliefs. And it brings about a sense of presence. But what's interesting is that people generally have an aptitude to connect to a few of these more effectively than others. So when I'm with a client, I will see that they catch thoughts very quickly. They go into their thought processing, and I notice there's a thought there. Oh, I notice their behavior there. He's relating an event, so there's an image there. And then as they're doing that, I invite them. Oh, I noticed that your breath just started to relax there when you tapped into that. Do you notice that? And I bring their attention to the other experiences, other levels of experience that maybe they're not so attuned to. And the more we can tap into, the more of these levels of experience we can tap into, the more whole that we feel in ourselves, and the more likely we're going to be able to move towards change in our lives. So with that in mind, if you look at, let me just 1 second. If we look at our nervous system, I look at, in a lot of the work I do, I look at nervous system regulation This is a bottom-up approach, and this is based on the polyvagal theory that you could look up online by Stephen Porges. Is that our nervous system is made up of parasympathetic and sympathetic. So parasympathetic is what we usually talk about as rest and digest, and sympathetic they say fight and flight. So if I'm feeling good about myself and I'm feeling, I can meet challenges in the day and I'm available to people, available to tasks, I'm not becoming reactive, then this means that we're in a parasympathetic state. But the parasympathetic part of our nervous system is is not just about rest and digest. That is one element of the parasympathetic. There's another side of the parasympathetic that we're going to look at in a minute. So notice the colors. Green, which we call ventral vagal, this rest and digest state, this being available and feeling like you can, you're ready, is green like the traffic light, in terms of when it's green on the traffic light, we feel like we can move. We feel movement and momentum in our life. We feel like this is manageable and I can proceed. And then what happens in our day sometimes is that we start to get a bit angsty. Now this is what we're in sympathetic activation. And I don't like the term fight and flight, to be honest. I like activation because, for example, if I'm excited about something and it feels a little bit, uncontrollable, even if it's feel joyful, that's sympathetic energy as well. So it's not always about fighting or running away. It's just activation. It's what we call in the car the gas. So you're pressing down on the gas and you're actually efforting. Whilst with ventral vagal, it's more of a flow state. You don't even feel there's effort in something. You feel like you just be able to achieve things in the day without much efforting. While sympathetic, once you go into sympathetic, now it's more conscious and you're having to really apply yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need that in life. And if the situation requires us to run or to fight or to just be excited, we want to be able to tap into that. But we realize that it's not a sustainable state to stay in. And unfortunately, the modern world, which focuses very much on productivity and results, is really keeps us in a sympathetic state. And if we stay a lot of our time in the sympathetic state, what happens is that we can't maintain it, and we experience the other side of that, which is the red. If you think about the traffic light, the amber is actually we're ready, we're on alert now. Are we to stop or are we ready to go? And then when it's red, we're immobilized, we stop. And that's what we call the dorsal vagal shutdown response, or immobilization, which is the other side of the parasympathetic, is when we go into a freeze state. And this can be experienced in a very simple, benign way in our lives, is that when someone's talking, we just start to switch off and drift off a bit. When they're talking, we're not so engaged with them because we need that break. So we just, we drift off a little bit and then we come back. And so we're constantly flowing back and forth between these states. It's not that one's good, one's bad. It's just that sympathetic and dorsal vagal, they're not supposed to be, we're not supposed to stay in them for prolonged lengths of time. And if we do, then we start to experience physiological and emotional reactions to that. So the extreme of dorsal vagal will be fainting, literally dropping down, fainting. And we can experience dorsal vagal in numbness and other things. And what happens if these become chronic? We start to experience things like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression. Depression is just an experience of being locked in a dorsal vagal shutdown response. And what's interesting, depression is usually coupled with anxiety. They're both there, and anxiety is expression of the sympathetic, and the depression is an example of the shutdown response. So the dorsal vagal is like the brake. We've got the gas and we've got the brake, and they want to be in relationship to one another. And in that we get the flow, and sometimes we need a bit more gas, sometimes we need a bit more brake, and they're in communication with one another. The problem comes is where we're, with too much gas or too much brake, we start to damage the car or the vehicle and our nervous systems. So notice here we've got expressions. What's really important is that we want to be curious about our We want to be curious about the way we express ourselves. So if I say to myself, I just want to get away, I just want to be by myself, which one of that is that? Is that red, amber, or green? That's an expression of they're just feeling overwhelmed. I can't cope, I'm collapsed, I just want to shut down, I feel numb, I just don't feel available. This is just a sign that you're in your dorsal vagal response and you need to slow down and come back into feeling. Come back into curiosity, because curiosity is the antidote to these being, pathologically getting locked into these states. So if I'm in the dorsal vagal feeling really down and I say to you, what's that experience like? When you ask that question, what's that experience like? It induces a sense of curiosity. And curiosity takes you out of a shutdown response. So if I'm feeling a bit shut down, you can just sit on a bench in a park and just look around, listen to things, look around at things. And then you say, no, that feels overwhelming. So you respect that and you just shut down and go within yourself a bit and feel, does that feel, oh, that feels better. And then after a while, you just have another look. And now do you feel a little bit more available? And so it's almost like the tortoise or the snail. I like to use the snail. Is it reaches out. And if it's too much, it draws back in. And then eventually the ventral vagal be where its antennae are completely drawn and its body is completely drawn out of the shell. How do you know you're in sympathetic? You're getting irritated physiologically. You're expressing things like, oh, I just want him to shut up. I want to punch him. I want to, I just want to run from this experience and do something. I just want to get on with my work. These are all sympathetic expressions of the sympathetic part of our nervous system. And then ventral vagal would be like, it's not as bad as I think I made it out to be. I actually feel like, it's manageable. This is an expression of the ventral vagal. So what I invite you to do in your day is to actually ask yourself in moments of the day, where are you in your nervous system? And obviously this is a map, it's oversimplified map. Sometimes you're a blend of some of these. And we can fluctuate very quickly sometimes between these. But just start to explore it. And the way I explore it is, imagine your nervous system as like your mobile phone, is that you're checking on its battery life through the day. And so if you're overusing it, you're in sympathetic with your mobile phone, obviously the battery life's going to get, it's going to start getting affected. And so you ask yourself, am I overusing my phone? And maybe I need to just give it a break for a bit. If the battery life's down to about 10%, now you're going down to dorsal vagal. So I need to plug it in. So I have to have moments where I'm just slowing things down, and I'm just being with the experience. And ideally, we want to be able to do this in a back and forthness. And if we can catch things in their early stages, so suddenly, I can feel my muscles, my back, just getting a hint of a tension. It doesn't mean that we're stopping what we're doing. We're just like, can I just let my shoulders down a little bit as I'm doing my work? Can I, instead of going 100% at this thing, really giving it all, can I do 80%? Just to let a little gas out. So you're not asking yourself to stop everything. You're just doing it so you feel in your muscle tone that you just soften a little bit, so you're not giving so much intensity. So here's another like a graph of how this works. So notice the social engagement. You've got this wave going across, and things are in flow. And when you're in social engagement, that ventral vagal, the green, there's joy, you feel present, you feel grounded, you feel connected to yourself. There's curiosity, openness, you can feel compassion, you feel quite mindful, you're present in your mind. Your mind's not being pulled elsewhere. It feels like you're in your body. You feel safe, connected, oriented to the environment. And if you're experiencing that, you'll notice your digestion, you're ready to eat, you can eat. And so a lot of people that suffer from eating disorders is because, what I mean by that is their indigestion and all sorts of things. It's usually because we're trying to eat when our stomach's not in a rested state. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us when we're eating to sit down when we're eating. Because when you sit, your body physiologically feels like it's ready to receive because it goes into a grounded state. Whilst if we're on the move, we're in sympathetic, and so our stomach's not ready to receive. And if we're in an activated state when we're eating, our body's not going to process things as effectively. So when we're in ventral vagal, our digestion increases, our intestinal mobility is better, we're more resistant to infection. So are we getting colds and infections frequently? This could be a sign that we're in sympathetic or dorsal vagal a lot more than we should be. We can rest and recuperate a lot quicker. Circulation to non-vital organs, oxytocin, we feel involved in social bonds and allows immobility without fear. So immobility here is like is that I can let go of things and not become so fixated on things. Ability to relate and connect, and decreases defensive responses, so we feel less reactionary. If we're in sympathetic, which will be rage, anger, irritation, frustration, panic, fear, anxiety, worry, and concern, now you'll see that it's going up now. Do you see our sense of our activation goes up? You see that wave. Then our blood pressure goes up, our fuel and availability, our adrenaline starts pumping, which moves then into the cortisol, and starts really affecting us detrimentally if it's prolonged. Oxygen circulation to vital organs increases, so it starts to pump really fast. Our pupil size decreases, increases, and decreases fuel storage, insulin activity, digestion, saliva starts decrease. Relational ability, I feel less able to connect to others, and my immunity, I start to I'm less able to recover from things. And then the notice it says, interestingly, sympathetic, you feel like you can actually you can engage with things, but it's obviously an intense way. And then I can't, you feel overwhelmed. Look, disassociation, numbness, depression, conservation of energy, helplessness, shame, shutdown, hopelessness, preparation for death. I feel like I want to die, and I'll feel trapped and suffocated. And here your experience is physiologically. What increases is fuel storage and insulin activity, endorphins that help numb and raise the pain threshold. Your heart rate decreases, your temperature decreases, you become cold in your body. People that constantly complain about feeling cold. Facial expression, you've got like a numbed face almost. They call it a flat face, where you just don't feel like you engage and you express your muscles. Intonation of your voice doesn't feel like there's a flow in your voice. And so forth and so forth. So I think you get the idea. So you want to be curious about where you are in the day with these things. Now you'll notice that with this polyvagal theory, this idea of our nervous systems, how do we come out of the shutdown response or the activation? Is we have to operate the vagus nerve, and you'll see in the middle of this chart, this is the vagus nerve. It's actually the longest nerve in our body. It connects from our brainstem all the way down to our gut, and we've got myelinated nerves and unmyelinated nerves there. And the unmyelinated what connects to the stomach, and the myelinated what connects to the top half of our body, where we're more nuanced in our responses to things. When you shut down all of a sudden, that's an unnuanced response, which means it's unmyelinated, it's more primitive, the experience of things. And so in order for us to come out of sympathetic activation or this dorsal vagal shutdown response, we want to be able to stimulate the vagus nerve. And how do we stimulate the vagus nerve? Here's a few ways. Deep breathing. But in somatic work, we don't induce deep breathing, because what that can do is that can actually activate you more. So what we want to do is we want deep breathing to happen naturally. And the way we do that is if it feels comfortable, because it's got to feel comfortable and safe to do or it won't work. Can you sit with your breath and just notice, is it high? Is it in the middle? Is it feel quite deep? And can you be with it for 10 seconds? You can do this with me now. Can you be with it for 10 seconds? So I'm just noticing my breath. And obviously I've been talking for about an hour now, and I'm a bit excited because I know I've got to get through this. Yeah, and I'm noticing my breath just drop a bit now that I'm being with it. And I notice as I do that, a little bit of tension in my head just drops a bit. And actually I'm feeling a little bit of fizziness in my nose that feels a little bit teary. I'm not tearing up, but I can feel a little bit of propensity for being teary. So this is, and then naturally we feel the breath drop as we can be with our experience. And this is what we call, Peter Levine, who's the developer of this modality, somatic experiencing, He calls this being breathed into, which I love that, and that image, because it's like, it reminds me of when Adam was breathed into, like it's almost a gift from God. It just comes, this autonomic breath. Another way is gut health. So we need to look at probiotics, like what we're taking and what we're eating. It's really important we address the food that we eat, and I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole massive topic in itself. Stimulating the vocal cords. So when we send a vibration down our body, it actually stimulates the vagus nerve that opens up our organs to know that we feel safe. And one exercise we do in somatic experiencing is that you take a breath in and then you do this sound, which is called the VOO. And you do a real guttural sound. And what it does, you send it to your belly. And what this does is, after you've done that, you do it maybe once or twice, and really drawing it out in a gentle way, not an intense way, softening the eyes as you do it. And then tuning into your body as how it reacts to that. And then really being with your experience. Notice I feel like a little bit of tingling in my arms as I've done that. And I feel like my belly softened. And what I find amazing about this practice is we actually have it. It sounds like Allah's name when you're doing it. Allah. And then, but the key is, it's not just doing this thing repetitively. It's what do you experience in yourself when you say that. And how do you physiologically react and respond to it? So singing, stimulating the vocal cords, reciting Quran, but it has to be done in a mindful way and being experiencing physiologically how you're reacting to that. Now, I'm aware I've gone over an hour, guys. How much longer do you want me to speak before I go to questions and answers? So if you can WhatsApp me, I'm looking at the WhatsApp group there. So consume omega-3. So again, that's dietary. So exploring diet. Chill out. This is a really interesting and very practical thing we can do. I don't know if people are aware of Wim Hof method. Now, what I do recommend that people apply this with caution. But one way that we can really start to experience coming into a ventral vagal state is that we can apply cold water to ourselves. And isn't this amazing that wudu is recommended to do with cold water? So by splashing water on the face, it stimulates the muscles in our face that brings us into a ventral vagal state. So when you wash in wudu, to sit for a moment and just feel what that feels like on your face, and it brings you into a more open state. Also showers, cold showers. So what I do with a shower is I have a hot shower because I love my power showers. And one way is I love to treat myself. When I was living in Morocco, the one thing I missed was the heat, hot pounding power showers. But what I do at the end is I will slowly reduce the temperature, and I will put my body to it. And does that feel comfortable? Can I manage that? And then that feels manageable, so I do a little bit more until I get it to a cold temperature. And can I stay under there? And what usually comes up is this like breath, like this deep breath. And then we have this down regulation where I feel like, oh, I feel alive almost. And then we feel warmth, inner warmth afterwards. And so you can experiment that. And I experiment. I encourage people to play around with their children in this, but in a playful way, not in a torturous way, where you get them to build their resiliency. Can they cope with a bit of fun with cold water? And you notice kids do this naturally. They go outside and they get wet in the cold, and they generally don't complain as much as we do. It's really important that children have this experience of extremes, but in a way that feels safe and playful, not in a way that we're forcing it. So that's another way that we can stimulate the vagus nerve and bring ourselves into a ventral vagal state. Find your safe place. So connecting to things. When do you feel alive? When do you feel connected? When in yourself, with other people, with animals, in the environment, and really sitting with that and experiencing that on the 7 levels of our experience that I referred to. Next one, exercise regularly. Yes. Exercise, but not in a way that we're really pushing ourselves. So intensity, but knowing that's enough, and then coming off, and then feeling the down regulation of that. Coming down, oh, I feel now I'm ready to do some more. That's really important when we're doing exercise. Also things like Tai Chi and Qigong, where we're feeling our experience. Really tapping into our felt sense, things that make us feel connected to ourselves is really important. Soft exercises and hard exercises. In traditional martial arts, they used to have yin and yang. And in yoga, they have this, the yin and yang as well. Hard practices, and it always was coupled with soft. And then taking it easy, being playful, like joking a bit. Sometimes us religious people, we have the propensity to be a bit too serious, intense about things. So can we feel a bit of ease and relaxation? And the Prophet ﷺ loved to play around, So, so you tell me, guys, give me like a 5 minutes heads up when we go into questions. I'm relaxed. I can go up to about 1:45. So now, what do we mean by list of sensations? Now, this is really important because, look, we've got the way we experience sensations in a general sense is that we have constriction, expansion, which we have in Islam as the qabd and the bast. Expansion, and qabd, the constriction, and bast, the expansion. And we have the night and the day. So the night is the constriction, the expansion is the day. Okay, that's fine. So start at 20 past with questions. And our sensations are generally grouped into these categories. So what I invite people to do is like, what are they experiencing? So here's a list, and I can send these out. I'll give them to the organisers, and they can send them out to people if they wish. Is that when you're tapping into your sensations, are they sensations of constriction or expansion? So I'll just give you a moment to explore them. So as you look at that list, can you connect and relate to any of those right now? So as I'm tapping into this, again, I'm feeling a little bit of letting go in my system because I'm slowing down and allowing myself to do that, which I know I have the propensity when I'm talking to really just keep pushing. I'm in sympathetic adrenal a lot. Or I can even go into a bit of a numb state where I'm just gone past the bar. I've gone past the threshold of what I'm able to do, and I'm just getting information out, but not really being present with it. So as I'm slowing down, I'm feeling a bit of a deepening in my sense of self and a dropping. I'm feeling a bit of ease in my skin. And I'm feeling warmth in my stomach, and so forth. So I'm tapping into actually experiences of expansion at the moment. So I feel pretty much in ventral vagal, a little bit of urgency, because obviously I'm trying to get through this material. So there is a little bit of sympathetic activation, but there's a nice little flow between expansion and constriction. What about you? So that's really what I wanted to touch upon today is, well, I will talk a bit more about sensations actually. So sensations, why are sensations so important? Because if you think about it, when you're in the womb of your mother, your cognitive capacity was not on board. You weren't thinking as that baby in the womb of your mother. There was no cognition. And your emotional availability was very basic and primitive. They were more like urges, like rage or bliss. They weren't more complex emotions like jealousy, resentment, and so forth. But you were definitely experiencing sensations, heat, flow. So the foundational experience of ourselves and the world is sensations. And what happens is, as we grow into young infants, we go more into emotions, and our caregivers are there to regulate. So when we become upset, the mother comes or the father comes and they hold them and soothe them. As we become a toddler, then we become excited and erratic, and we teach the child, ideally, this is where I feel the struggle comes in our development, is as parents, we really don't know how to manage our own emotions, so how are we going to know how to regulate the child's? Is like, can we bring them down? And we do this, we stimulate our emotions very intuitively, like peekaboo. That's stimulating the facial muscles, which is stimulating the ventral vagal. We do when they're older, we start playing with them, and we start getting them excited. Be a tiger now. Can you go and sleep and be like? Can you sleep in your lens. So what you're doing is you're teaching the child to move between relaxation and activation, and we want this back and forthness, this pendulation, moving back and forth. We want our child to be able to develop that, and even hot and cold. That's another experience. Can they experience heat? Can they experience cold? We don't want to keep them fixated on one or the other, because that means that we don't develop resiliency. Resiliency is actually experiencing the two sides of life. You know, the feminine, the masculine, the Jamal and the Jalal, the yin and the yang, whatever you want to call it. The two sides. As Allah said, He's created things in pairs. Is that there's two sides to things, and as we can experience both of them, then we transcend. We transcend and include. We be in relationship to the binary, the polar opposites, and then we also be in touch with something bigger, which is transcendence. And I believe one of the greatest ways for us to develop that is in relationships. Fundamentally, husband and wife is a great arena for us. Can we work together on our differences instead of trying to change one another and be frustrated with one another? Can we be open to exploring with one another of how they can integrate these two sides, and then we experience something different, that's transcendent, that's broader. But it's not transcendent and exclusion. It's transcendence with inclusion, which is a very divine quality, that Allah is transcendent, but He's immanent. He's closer to us than our own jugular vein, but He's also above His creation. And so what we look at, if we're working with something, we want to experience it in terms of thoughts, emotions, and sensations, body, mind, and spirit. Body and mind, and then the spirit. When we can include and integrate that, we experience the spirit of it. And the way I look at that is that the sensations are the letters, the emotions are the words, and the thoughts and the beliefs are the sentences. So when you say, I am unlovable, for example, what's the emotion there? Sadness. What's the sensations there? An inner sort of collapse in my physiology. And when we change, if we go to sensations, what we're doing is we're reworking the letters that rework the words that restructure the sentence. So when we go to a bottom-up approach, we're actually really going to a deep, core way of addressing the issue. Whilst when we're working with thoughts and just processing things cognitively, it's less effective. We need that. We need to have that in, as a tool, but it's not the be and end all. We need to be experiencing things on a deeper experience, on these 7 levels of experience, and really being willing to explore rather than solve. Because when we're trying to solve, we're in our own, we're limited in our perspective, and we're not really connected to something broader, which is, i.e., Allah. So this is one way to experience a relationship with God, is to really tap into the broader experience of ourselves. So that's why I stress the importance of sensations, is that it reworks the very framework of the way we experience ourselves, others, and the world around us. But it's not the be and end all. We need obviously all the other components, but it's something that's sorely missing, I think, in our experience of ourselves and our relationship to others and the world around us. So, I think I'm about done. There's probably more that I can speak of, but I think it's time for questions and answers now. So I'm going to come out of the share. How do I do that? Let me just... Is everyone seeing us all back together now?
I think so, because I can see. Can you hear me, Sheikh Idris?
Yep, I can hear you, yeah.
Excellent. Can I just say, first and foremost, thank you so much. All of that was really fascinating and engaging. And I'm having to keep on top of checking both other streaming platforms for questions and things. Throughout all of that, though, mashallah, this has been really insightful. So Jazakallah khairan on behalf of all of us for helping us through that journey. We've had a number of questions, and I'm conscious we've got about 15 minutes, inshallah. So I'm going to get straight to them. Now, here's a very interesting one to start us off. So we have a question. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ had a special status with God. Did he really experience the same emotional challenges that we do? In other words, is that relatable? You spoke about the Prophet's experience with his son Ibrahim at his passing. but his ability, in spite of that, to restrain his tongue,
mm,
the heart sheds tears, the heart grieves, the
mm,
eye sheds tears, and the heart grieves, but the tongue's committed to only speaking that which is pleasing to
mm.
God.
Yeah.
That reasonable for the average man, woman? So, Bismillah.
Yeah, I mean, this is very. This comes about the sort of how we understand the prophet and the prophets, and that's really
Mm,
important that we study in Aqidah the qualities of the prophets and what they can and what they can't. You know, what's permissible for them, what's not possible and fathomable for them. And we know that in Aqidah they talk about that the prophets can experience illness. And they experience emotions because emotions aren't psychological. Emotions are actually physiological. The psychological element is how we associate with that emotion. So as I'm feeling this experience of grief or disgust or shame, you get there's a physiological experience of that, isn't it? And then it's what we do with it.
mm,
That's what we talk about emotions. There's no morality to emotions. They show up, but the morality around the emotion is what we do with it. And so the Prophet ﷺ, obviously, we see even in the Prophet ﷺ his progression in how he was dealing with the wahi and his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see in the seerah the initial stages were very different to the way he was later in life. So we can even see a progression. And we know this from a theological ways that the creation's constantly in flux, but with the prophets, they're constantly growing. So, and the way of creation is we're either increasing, decreasing. We're never stuck and stationary. And so, but with the
and
prophets,
I think that, Afwan, sorry, I was just going to say that that's so important to keep in mind because he's at once the best and greatest of all of creation. Simultaneously, he's the perfect exemplar and role model for us as human beings. And between the two, therefore, there is a relatability.
yeah,
And I think exactly as you described, the fact that there is an upward, with the rest of us, we're topsy turvy. We have good days and bad days, we have highs and lows. With the messenger, though, we see that every day is an increase.
mm,
Rabbi zidni ilma.
mm,
Every day is a growth, but it means that throughout his life, we find the very first experience of revelation, his response is, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, laqad khashitu ala nafsi.
it's
Cover me,
overwhelming.
my wife.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
Mm,
And of course, it talks about how do you imagine that you can you enter paradise and you've not been stricken by anything like what people before you had to face? War, calamity, and hardships shook their world. حتى يقول الرسول
mm,
والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله.
mm,
To the point that at times even the messenger of the day and the believers around him began to wonder, God, when will your help come to us? Allah, inna nasrullahi qareeb. God's help is ever near.
yeah.
That was a human and very human and emotional, rather than questioning of aqidah and theology
Mm,
response. So Anbiya are relatable to us.
yeah.
And so thank you so much.
No
I'm
problem.
just going to another that we've had, which is in a sort of similar strain actually, um, is perhaps this. Sorry, do psychological models such as the ones that you've gone through today? This is a question that someone's asking. Do they need to be supported by hard science to lend them credence, or can they make a lot of sense and still be very helpful without that?
Yeah,
And
that's
I
a,
think this relates about
it's good.
prophets. We're talking about almost an experiential reality.
Yeah.
But what would you say? What would your
Well,
thoughts
well,
be on that
I
question about the?
well, it's funny in couples therapy. I'm often dealing with this. Is someone's got this way of looking at the relationship, and I say to them, "You could be absolutely right. How's it working though?"
Yeah.
You know, and if it's not working, we have to say that your understanding may there may be some truth to it, but in the application, you're not understanding. There's not truth there because it for something to work. Sorry, for something to be true, it has to align with reality as well. And so
Mm,
I agree in that these maps, they're maps in the end, and if they work, brilliant. And we will have to refine them. you know. And we as Muslims, we weren't scared to explore. Like, this is in our early history, we were grappling with really
Mm,
like problematic concepts like Greek theology, Greek you know, Hellenistic thought. And what I say is,
mm,
it took generations to get it right. It wasn't like, you know, we were constantly having to refine and reassess. And even then, there was grey areas. You know, these debates between Ibn Sina, you know, with with Ibn Rushd and Imam Ghazali. They were battling with these things,
mm.
and we got to a certain stage where we went, we're happy with this model. But it took generations to do that, and it's this constant reassessing, going back to something, exploring, and that's when you know, we were thriving as a community. I believe that there's
Mm.
what happens to when a community starts to lose its sense is when they become scared of the outside world. It's actually a trauma response, that where they any new stimulus that comes into their experience, they're like, oh, that's probably wrong, that's evil, and they're just ready to sort of dismiss anything. That is actually, we look at that as a trauma response because they're scared of the world around them, rather than when they feel confidence in their deen, they have yaqeen and certainty, they go forth, but they are trying to align it with their religion and their principles and their faith. But we're also ready to say we can make mistakes, because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever exerts himself and gets it wrong gets one reward, and whoever gets it you know, gets it right gets two. And we're holding one another to accountability. So
Absolutely.
even in this discussion today, Sheikh Shafi's here and I'm here, and we want to battle out and wrestle this stuff, because we do want to come to a point where everyone is sort of satisfied with this model, feels like it's in line with our principles.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said. The modern world and the way we approach knowledge, the epistemology, if you like, of modernity, is
Mm,
almost based on this idea of what some might call scientism.
mm,
That you have to get everything down to a empirically demonstrable, level before you can, and otherwise it's hocus. It's it's rubbish. The Quran, and this is where a lot of people then approach the Quran like it's a science textbook,
mm,
and then say, look, the Quran says this, and so therefore we must understand from this the nature of whether the Earth's round or flat, or um, whether the sun rises in the east or the
mm,
west, or that's rotating on its axis, and all sorts of things. Whereas the Quran's not committing itself to making any very specific scientific statements, but it's addressing you and me, the human being, from our perspective of reality. And so, if we're talking about perspectives, and this is why it is important, even when, as you rightly point out, this is a journey. We'll find a lot of things in the writings of earlier Muslims which are of immense benefit, and amongst that, they will find things which are outdated ideas, and perhaps in the passage of time, in the fullness of time, we don't believe in the humors, for example, in the way that maybe they did in the past, or we
mm,
don't believe in a number of things. We've realized that, and whatever that may be, and there's nothing wrong whatsoever, because that's not Quran, it's not, Hujjah. Those are human beings always trying to make sense of their world in their time as
mm,
best they could.
mm.
And we have the same onus today. And so, Jazakallah khairan, this is very much part of that. Right, now here's a very good question. Can you uh, can you talk more about the feedback loop with Allah?
Right, what does that mean?
It's an interesting.
I don't know
Right,
when
I'll
and
tell
it,
you what I was thinking when I read the question, because we're talking about dealing with emotions and dealing with situations and not letting it overwhelm us, but also not becoming passive, sort of inactive to the point that we're disconnected. And
mm,
so there's a need to think about, to process, but there's also dua,
yeah. Okay.
and we speak to Allah, we put it before Allah. And the Prophet urged us, alayhi salatu wasalam, even if it's the strap of your shoe that you find yourself in need of at this moment, don't hesitate in speaking to Allah about it.
Mm,
But he, at the same time, he warned us about becoming despondent with dua, because we have an instant, sort of gratification idea.
mm,
I just made dua and I've not answered yet. Da'awtu wa da'awtu falam ara yustajabu li.
mm,
And حينئذ يتحسر عن الدعاء.
mm,
And at that time, a person becomes gives up and says, "Well, I've asked and asked, and I'm not seeing any answers to my prayer." So somewhere in between, keeping connected to God and yet having the, I guess, the resilience to not expect. It's not an Amazon order next day delivery. Dua is something far more than that.
Right.
And that's what I was thinking about the feedback.
Yeah,
Allahu Alam.
I was
You
looking at slightly
share some
different
thoughts.
ways, so it's more of a this is something we need to unpack really. Like which is a really interesting concept, which was demonstrated in that hadith, you know, the i'qal wa tawakkal, like tether your camel and then rely, is that we do and then we wait for the response. Like how, you know, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is like how do we know we're actually aligned with Allah? How do we know we're reading Him correctly? And I obviously we have to act in the world, and then and this is the iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. It's the worship, and then feeling what's the feedback, because that's really missing. I think when I bring it into context with what you are so mentioned, Sheikh Shafi, about my du'as not being accepted. What I often find with people is they go into a sympathetic state with du'as, like this desperate grabbing, like and they see things from a very limited perspective. But when we can actually pan out and see what's the feedback Allah's given me to this dua, like what's happening now, I've thrown out this dua. What's happened? What's the events that's happening in my day? What's things that people are saying when I'm consulting with people on this issue? What's the sort of thing? And do I feel that there's flow? I call this 3 strikes and you're out. If you're hitting your head against a wall 3 times with something, and it's a general rule, is that it may be that that's not the direction you want to go, and it's not, and Allah's not asking you to go for, that in that route. And so we have to be open to something outside of our experience, rather than us thinking we know how Allah should answer this, or what the way that Allah's going to answer it. And so it's like, as we're going forward, do we feel momentum behind us? And do we feel we're moving towards something that's wholer and more wholesome, and we feel that we're feeling connectivity? I generally feel, and then obviously aligning with our religious principles. We have to also, obviously, we as Muslims, we're looking, what does the tradition say about this? And it's really important that, I think that our religious scholars are really grounded in practical daily life wisdom in these things. We're not just giving textbooks, but we're aligning with a tradition. But then, how does it align with our lived experience? And
Absolutely.
we be real. We just say we have the ability to say, I'm not there yet. That's the ideal. I can feel myself moving towards that, but I'm not there yet, and I have to accept that, because if I try to just change something immediately, I'm always self-sabotaging. If you're self-sabotaging unconsciously, this is a sign you're trying to do too much. And so read the
Yes.
feedback, that Allah is sending you in your life. So that's what I understand by the feedback, Luke, is that you act, what's the response? You act, what's the response? And the response will be, I
Yep.
start to feel flow, and it's in accordance with my it's aligned with my religious principles as well.
And can I and Jazakallah khair, that's very beautifully put, because I think you're right. We can become so fixated on our idea of what the answering of this prayer looks like that we miss everything else that's happened since I've been able to raise my hands and engage with Allah and pour out my heart before Allah.
Mm.
While we're so short, the answering of dua means I get the thing I asked for and I need to see this. I'm missing that Allah's given me nur. Allah, there's an ease, because I'm not taking the time to, or opening myself, allowing myself to be open to that.
Exactly.
Umar ibn Khattab, there's a beautiful saying of his, that he said, "Inni ahmil ham ad-du'a wa la ahmil ham al-istijaba." I'm concerned with whether I'm making dua. I'm not
Yeah,
concerned
I
with
like
whether
it.
my dua
Yeah.
answered. فَمَنْ رُزِقَ الدُّعَاء فَالِاسْتِجَابَةُ مَعَهُ. Because the one who's blessed with the opportunity to make dua,
Yeah.
to commune with Allah, has already had the answer.
Yeah.
Allah's called you to His door, and the generous doesn't call you to His door to turn you away empty-handed.
Yeah.
How He's answering you is in keeping with His infinite and vast wisdom,
Yeah.
and we need to develop ourselves, or have a preparedness to open up and accept His decree, and His guidance. So what I've asked for might not be what actually is what I need right now,
Yeah.
and what Allah knows I need
Yeah.
right now.
And He
And
knows
so
what
I
you
have to
need.
prepare. I've put it to Allah, and now and that's rida bil qada. That's developing a sense of being well pleased and satisfied with the divine decree. I put it to him, and now I'm going to look for how Allah answers, and He may answer me in ways that I haven't imagined, ways that are completely mind blowing to me. But all of that is part of the answer that I need, even if it's not uh, the answer to the question I specifically asked. Like, inshallah, I hope that's also a part of that. Mashallah, we've just gone over time, but we have a 15-minute flexibility. Sheikh Idris, you very kindly said you're happy to carry on for a few minutes longer. So I think we'll just wrap with two last questions that are both related. And they're to do with the concept of counseling and therapy. So I'll put both questions to you, if I may, and then you can share your thoughts. Was there a tradition of counseling and therapy in early Muslim communities, or is this a modern day concept? So that's one question. And the other is, how can we here we are. Why are Muslim communities so averse to counseling, and how can we start to overcome this? So one's about his past, but one's about today.
Okay. Yeah. Number one, my understanding, when I reflect on that question, I think we have to look at it, first of all, religious institutions often held that role of counseling, but also the community held that role. So we have to, one of the things that I think we're really missing in our curriculum is the social sciences, contextualizing things, because a lot of our tradition is written in a pre-modern context, and they took a lot for granted that we don't have today. And one of them is just the village and the community and the tribe. And you know, I often make this joke. I say, like, why do we need, people say, why do we need to focus on this organic food, counting our steps, going to the gym, all these things? Like, people of the ancients never did any of this stuff. It's because they unconsciously lived these things. So organic food, you ate food, and you didn't have to worry about, was it organic, was it healthy? You know, now we have to consciously we have to expend our consciousness, our money, and effort to just be normal. Whilst the ancients were able to do these things unconsciously without thinking about them. Another example is exercise. Just to get through your daily routine of the day, you had to expend your body. We live in a day and age now where we have to consciously use our effort, because I'm sitting here in front of a computer screen, and I literally. Sorry.
I said we have to take out a gym membership today.
Yeah. Now we have to run on a conveyor belt. Now we can laugh at it, and it is laughable, but we still need to do it. Like, we recognize the ludicrous situation we're in as human beings. We've moved away from our humanity, our fitra. And another one is, in the old days, the tribe would. I read this beautiful story yesterday about there was this tribe, and there was this young girl, and her mother became really enraged, and she threw hot water on her daughter. And obviously that's traumatizing. Your mother, who takes care of you, lashed out and did this act. Now, she ran outside screaming, the daughter, and the tribe held her and said, what your mother has done is wrong. We're here for you. And they sat and allowed her to process what had happened. Now, so that's how traditional societies were. It wasn't just the immediate nuclear family. The whole community held the experiences and held people accountable immediately. Whilst now we're dependent on the state and the government to hold people accountable. We've decentralized. Sorry, we're not decentralized. I mean, sorry.
We're fragmented.
We're fragmented. The very traditional institutions that will, if you're unhappy with your husband or your wife, things were going on, that the community stepped in and sorted things. Now we've put all that onus on the state that can't hold that. And now it's like we're rupturing as a whole society. And so now we're forced to do radical things. Now we can't get that holding from the community. So now we have to pay for a professional just to get a meaningful a conversation out of somebody. And it's so hard.
Which is like having to pay for your gym membership.
Yeah.
In order to give your body what once upon a time you got in the course of everyday life.
Yeah. Exactly. So why are we adverse to it? Because we think, well, they didn't do it. Why should that? Which is a natural reaction. Why do we have to do this? Is alien to us. And naturally, as I said, especially when a community is traumatized, they're very much adverse to being open to things that are from the outside, because we create this
Yeah.
sort of almost introverted fearfulness around things that are we're not used to, and feel like it's attacking us, and it's of compromising us. Whilst
Mm.
the early Muslim community, obviously there was a version. We do see that, like for example, Imam Malik, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, they were very reluctant initially to entertain Islam, philosophy. But then,
Mm. Mm.
and so there was a sense of response. So I think it's fair to say that there was a sort of ooh, but then the scholars later on realized this is actually, we need to address this because this is a reality we're living
And
now. Whilst the early generation weren't living it or didn't need it as much, they didn't feel the need of it. But later generations, we
and
feel we're so far removed from the traditional supports that hold us. We can't dismiss this anymore. And I feel that we're in that position. Maybe our aunties and uncles and grandfathers didn't need this as much. I don't know. I can't speak on their behalf. But I can say that we as a community, we do need something, because what's currently there
we
for
need
us is.
absolutely, and I suspect actually you've hit the nail on the head. Our aunties, uncles, and elder generations had the wraparound community or tribe, which which fulfills that role very, very well. Now, the Quran already, a really deeply rooted aspect of our faith is the idea of a good word. The Quran says, قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِنْ صَدَقَةٍ يَتْبَعُهَا أَذًى.
Mm,
Better than giving charity money to someone and then harassing them about it or reminding them about it or boasting to others about it. It's far better that you don't give a single penny, but you give them a goodly word
mm,
and you give them an attractive heart that's
yeah.
willing to accept them for their faults and forgive them, and your kindness. Now that's count. The Prophet said, "Alayhi salatu wasalam, ad-din and nasiha." The entirety of this faith is nasiha, which is sincerity, but it's also
Yeah.
wishing well for
Wishing
somebody,
well,
and it's
yeah, yeah.
also advising, and it's advising sincerely
Yeah.
and someone towards good. And he said, "Al kalimatul hasana sadaqa." A good word to a person is charity, and all of these so many different traditions, which show that actually the individual. Now, when you spoke about the fact that we have become fragmented and disconnected, it makes me think immediately about the importance Islam attaches to silatul rahim, staying connected. The Quran says one of the things that Allah condemns communities for is الَّذِينَ يَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ.
Mm,
Those who sever the ties that God has demanded be kept maintained,
mm,
so that we have a wraparound, so that you can speak to your elder brother or sister, your uncle or aunt, your cousin, your neighbor, the farmer, whoever it may be, who, because there needs to be an avenue. And if we in the absence of that, we can become pressure cookers. We can become ticking time bombs, ready to, particularly in a very dysfunctional and unnatural world, which is what we're experiencing today. The postmodern world is not a natural place. It is removed from fitra. And therefore, as an imam and a chaplain in the prison service for many years, one of the things I came to realize is we spent all of our training in studying fiqh. In the real world, fiqh is perhaps 5% of my work. People seeking advice and support and emotional help is maybe the bulk of it. We see couples as imams, Sheikh Idris, you do, and other imams, and the vast majority of the time it's not the specific fiqh issue, but there's everything else, and he doesn't appreciate and she doesn't understand, and how do we help. And so we're not just there opening up kitab al-talaq and looking up al-fatawa al-hindiya or whatever it may be, to say, well, in this issue actually, yes, the talaq is valid or it's not, assalamu alaikum, because there's a whole sort of, there's so much else going on.
mm.
Jazakallah khairan. So I think that brings us now to there's one more. Maybe I'll just quickly touch on it, and then we're going to close, because I'm really conscious you've got other commitments and you've been very kind with your time already. What advice would you give to someone in undergoing current stresses with lockdown, and describes feeling a sense of indifference to life, neither in a positive or negative way particularly, but a general numbness?
Mm.
What's the advice as a parting note to somebody in that situation?
What?
And I think this is actually what maybe a lot of us are actually grappling with.
Yeah, well, we notice that's a dorsal vagal shutdown response. If you're feeling indifferent to life, you're feeling numb, and so it's really on a felt sense, tapping into things that actually bring you aliveness. And so,
Um,
because you're surviving, you're obviously not thriving, you're dealing. What is it that gets you up in the morning? There must be something there that you're really, that gives you some respite in your life. And starting with that and exploring what that's like to explore that and waiting what emerges after you sit and sort of bathe in that experience on the sensations, emotions, feelings, images, it's 7 levels of experience. And then what that leads to as you would go on that journey of exploration. We call this the active imagination that Carl Jung called. He's like really working and dwelling and mulling on this. And then fundamentally, what we do from an Islamic sense, which we call the transcendent imagination, is that how is one of God's names in this? So as I do this activity, it
mm,
makes me feel like I feel there's hope. Which one of Allah's names relates to that hope? And then you're connecting it, and you're transcending something even beyond creation, and then feeling Allah's divine being in that experience. And then also fundamentally, it's reaching out for help. If you're feeling like this and you're struggling to get out of it, that one of the most effective means is connection. But that person that you're reaching out to has to be able to hold that space for you, and that's basically what we, as therapists and counselors, do. And this is why I call religious leaders. We really have to get trained in these skills because people really do need to hear to feel safe when they're going to counseling and therapy. And one of those
yeah.
safeties is that that person is understanding them from their religious context, and that this is not going to be it's not going to conflict with their culture and their beliefs and their tradition, and they can even explain things in the language that person needs to hear. So we talk about being culturally aware therapy and psychotherapy is like imams. Really, this is imperative now that anyone that's working in a public capacity, working with the community, they need some counseling and therapy work, and they need to be doing that work as well because it's the lived work. It's the lived work of all the academic work you did. You need to live it and bring it into your life and get it working. And I think it's been the most effective tool for me to really bring about a profound change in my life. So it's about us connecting as a community and being able to help and support one another. And that's when people feel hope.